Good evening. Coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana on a Tuesday night, talking about football? Yes, effing football. Love it, guys. Look, I promised you guys I was going to do baseball on Tuesdays. I promised you guys I will do baseballs on Tuesdays. But in all honesty, guys, I got 3 flipping drafts this week. Okay? And in all honesty, I know we have baseball playoffs. I had to make sure I set my lineups tonight. It is important. But this draft is going to set you up for the rest of the year. Okay? These people that feed you this garbage that you win on the waiver wire, I don't buy it. Dominate your draft. Okay? That's what I'm going to help you do tonight. In case you didn't know, I'm Chappy. Chaps Fantasy Chat comes to you live and on demand from the Millennium Moment Fantasy Sports Network. I got a good start to the chat room here. George, my buddy Cub's on. Thanks for coming on, Cub. I really appreciate having you. I really hope you enjoy the content. I got a lot of stuff to cover. Honestly, this is designed to be a 2-part show. So I'm going to talk about just the cherry and maybe a little bit of the caramel and maybe some of the nuts on the sundae, right? That's all I'm going to get into with receivers tonight because I want to talk about, you guys know me. I love doing stats. So I got some really interesting wide receiver stats I want to talk about. And I want to build this story about how it's important to look at these things and understand where you're coming from, okay? So tonight's show, we're really going to do an overview on draft day strategy, okay? Of course, as I said, I'm going to do a quick take on my home city, not my team, but I think I got a pretty good read on what's going on here with these Colts. I want to talk about the Colts real quickly, and then I want to talk about some useful and interesting stats that you're going to take with you into your drafts, okay? And this will be something when you're deciding between one player and another player, it might just set you over the top when you say, oh, so-and-so had a great catch rate, okay? We're going to talk about catch rates. We're going to talk about last year's leaders because I think you get a lot of a prognostication this time of year, right? You got a lot of guys that claim they know what the hell they're talking about. But just like I always say in baseball, what's real? Statistics, okay? We're going to talk hardline statistics from last year, and we're going to apply it to going into this draft, okay? And then we're going to get into wide receiver talk, okay? So that's the plan. This is meant to be interactive. For those of you that are listening to me, I urge you, if you're not already in the chat room, I want this to be a question and answer type scenario as well. So if you go to LennyMelnickFantasySports.com, you hit the login button, you put your username and your password, you select Remember Me, and it'll bring you into the chat room. It'll remember your name. We can all identify who you are, and you can ask your questions, right? So let's start off. I held off on doing this version of to today because really now we're in the sweet spot, right? Third week's games have already happened. The starters aren't going to play next week. This is when you're going to have a majority of your legitimate drafts in this next week. Actually, week and 2 days, right? Opening kickoff is next Thursday. Any serious league who's well run, well thought out is going to draft after the third game and before the season starts. So that's why I did it now, right? I have 3 money leagues that I'm doing starting tomorrow and this next week. Let's talk about how I approach it. I'm going to repeat a little bit because I think I got a couple guys in here who haven't heard yet kind of my approach. Holistically, when I'm preparing for a draft, I use Google Sheets, but you can write it down. You can do it however you want. I write like an industry standard, so I use Football Diehards, for instance, and I will label. And if you use Football Diehards, it's pretty cool because you can go into it. They give you a code. You buy the magazine, which, I'm an old guy, so I like having the magazine, right? Then you go in, and they give you updated stats on their site, okay? So it updates from day to day, really. So I like going and getting a football diehard. I like putting on the right-hand side what the industry standard is. I update it from week to week for these shows because I think it's important to show where the ADP is going to, whether it's positive or negative, and contemplate on why, right? So I really suggest if you're drafting here in these next couple days, go grab a magazine. It's worth it. But then make your list. Have your independent thought, right? So sit there and think about what you value these players worth, okay? Hey, Kyle, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so that, again, I've repeated this, I understand, but I'll add one dynamic to this, okay? I add a third column in the middle for guys I really want, okay? So, for instance, just as an example, I happen to value, I don't know, Stephon Diggs higher than where I have him. I currently have him as my own personal wide receiver 10. I happen to value him over Mike Evans, let's say. And this is my actual list. I've said this before. I'm giving you my list I'm drafting with, okay? Because it's going to change. It's going to alter just enough that it won't be a life breaker. People are going to have their own opinions too, right? So, I make that middle column, and I'll actually put it, the guys who I have jumped Mike Evans in that order, so that when I'm drafting, I'm very concise in knowing who I want and what I was thinking at the time, right? So it brings me back to, in this instance, I jumped I put Antonio Brown in front of Stephon Diggs. I'll know why when I make that third list, okay? So again, it's organization is really what we're getting to, okay? That's the takeaway. It is if you have a running list, if you have data points, right, you'll be able to understand the trends. And if you really value a guy like, I'm just keeping it simple, Antonio Brown, and you see that he starts to go up, you have these data points, you see he's starting to go up, and I know that's a bad example because it's the front end of the draft, but you'll know when it's appropriate to get that guy, right? So if it's saying, I'll go a little bit further down, if it's saying that, for instance, Tyler Boyd is raised 3 points from a 5.8 to a 5.3, if he raises another, 5 points in the next week, right? We won't get into specifics, we'll do that later. You might have to go higher than the fifth round to get him if you really want him. So measuring these ADPs is important, because it tells you the guys that are really getting traction, okay? So, let's talk about draft day strategy. Let's talk about what we want to do holistically when we go into these drafts and why, okay? So, the first point I had written down here, have a plan, but be flexible, okay? Sit down there and really think to yourself, I want to break it down into quarters, half, thirds, however you want to do it. I like to break it down into quarters, right? Because I think it's really important. The running backs are going to run out quickly, so you want to make sure that you have a good stable of running backs. I've done that as a staple in the years past. This year, I'm kind of adopting the mantra of there's going to be enough of those core running backs that will drop. I want to make sure that my wide receivers are taken care of as well. And then I again, bringing full circle. That's why I did this tonight. It's important to understand the importance of the wide receiver position. If you go into the season and you don't have a true wide receiver one, you're fighting an uphill battle all year long, because you're not going to pick up a Hopkins off the waiver wire. You're not going to pick up an Antonio Brown off the waiver wire. You draft those guys, right? And I know that sounds simplistic, but I think it's important to understand. Know where there's value. Have classes of players, right? So that's what I say when I say have a plan, okay? So for instance, when I go into my drafts, I try to do a 3-2 running back to wide receiver draft. I strip away the quarterbacks, the tight ends, the defenses, and the kicker. I don't think about them, right? Don't think about them. Because there's so many of them, and they're all lumped together, right? That I'll take my shots on goal at receivers and running backs, because the more chances you get it increases your odds for getting guys who are going to break out. Okay? So that is my... first quarter of the draft, I'll aim to get 3 running backs and 1 wide receiver, or 2 and 2, right? So again, 3-to-2 ratio is basically what I'm looking at for the entirety of the draft. And now look, as I get to the second half of the draft, and I'm giving you, this is my plan, okay? As I get to the second half of the draft, I'll start bringing into thought process the tight end and the quarterback position. But there are so many of them. And if you're not going to spend, George, if you're not going to spend on Zach Ertz, if you're not going to spend on George Kittle, if you're not going to spend on these elite tight ends, then you're really doing yourself. And I'm telling you, give me Antonio Brown over Zach Ertz. Give me Antonio Brown over Travis Kelce. Because there's only a handful, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm going to get into this with stats in a little bit, okay? And this will drive the point home. Numbers are the truth. We could sit here and speculate till the cows come home, but the numbers are the truth. And when we sit down there and we talk about the nuts, we talk about the true statistics from last year, I think you'll be surprised at how marginal production was, aside from a few players, okay? So that's my first point. Have a plan, but be flexible. Understand that if a guy's there and he's getting looked past, you have to jump on it. It doesn't matter who it is. Know your positions of value. And that's wide receiver and running back, okay? Have a good core. You're only starting, in most leagues, you're only starting 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers. You might have a flex in there somewhere. Get good starters, right? That's the whole point. And then build good depth, okay? Point 2. Understand sleeper picks are just that. They're not meant to be comprised of your whole second half of your draft. They're meant to be taken in moderation. Just like anything fun, right? Have a list of sleepers. Know who you want to invest in. But don't overdraft them, right? If the other part is, have backup plans. So say you really like, say you really like a guy like James Washington. And when you're sitting there going after James Washington, you just don't get him. Someone sneaks in and gets him right in front of you, right? Have a backup plan. Have someone else in mind that's going to provide you value for where you get him in the draft, right? That's the whole point. Don't get discouraged when things go wrong, because everybody's trying. Things are going to go wrong, right? Don't overdraft your sleepers. Don't have a list of 15 of them and try and get 7 of them. It's going to leave you with a very, very marginal team. Have confidence in the 2 or 3 that you really like. Narrow it down. I like TJ Hawkinson too, George, to be clear. But don't saturate your team with them. That's my point. Okay? And people overinvest in sleepers so much. Don't let quality players go on hunches. That's my whole point, right? These next 2 points are vital, okay? The first one, and I swear by this, okay? If you take nothing away from what I tell you tonight, make a draft outline. What do I mean by that? Have certain points in the draft where you want to, whether it's shock the world and take the first quarterback, or draft your handcuff because you had to have whatever, right? I like to make a little box right? And round number, draft pick, outline. On the right-hand side, I'll put guys who I think are of value at that point in the draft in that outline. As a reminder, when I'm drafting, because I plan on filling that in, right? I plan on filling that in as it goes. So say I want Darwin Thompson, and say he's got a 12th round value. I'll put in that outline section Darwin Thompson in the 12th round. Because everything's just cluttered when you're drafting. But if you have that in front of you, you get the guys you really want, right? So, if, for instance, you have Dalvin Cook, as I do, in your draft outline, you might want to put in the 8th or 9th round his handcuff, Madison, or Alexander. I don't have it in front of me. I could get it, but that takes away time. I'm not going to do it. His handcuff, right? I'll put that in a round associated with where I think he'll go. Now, you might have to go around early, right? Because if y'all are like I am, I'm in some really competitive leagues. And as a matter of fact, I know all of them SOBs are going to listen to this podcast tonight. So they're going to understand where I'm coming from. And that's fine. I don't mind doing that. George, Cubby, I don't mind doing that. Because in my mind, and this might sound arrogant, it evens playing field. We're all working with the same set of rules, which makes it great, right? And I'm confident doing that because things change day to day, week to week. I love this stuff. I'm always thinking about it, right? Most people don't. Anyway, point 3. This is point 4. And this is probably, again, a super important point. Be a trendsetter. Don't be afraid to start the run. Have confidence. You'd rather start the run than be at the ass end of it. And guess what? You start the run, and then you still get the player you want on the back end because everybody else is scrambling. Don't be afraid to start the run, guys. I think that's super important. Especially, it's funny, especially if you're in a league, and this sounds arrogant, I don't mean it to be, where you're more experienced than your competition. It's vital to do in that scenario. I have a work league tomorrow. I will be starting the run every chance I get. I could pick up running backs in a work league. I'm not worried about it. Right? Give me the best quarterback. Give me the best tight end. I'll figure the rest of that shit out. Yeah. So, don't be afraid to start the run. It's vital. It gives you leverage. Okay? But then the important thing to start in a run, back it up with quality. If you get Pat Mahomes, go out and get you a good quality backup. I'd say even draft 3. You know why? Because it's trade bait. It's trade bait. If you have Lamar Jackson as your backup and he goes nuts this year, and you've been smart enough to draft a guy like Ben Roethlisberger as well, then you can let go of him and benefit from that. So, where most people say they're only going to draft one tight end or one receiver, or one quarterback, I say poppycock. Build depth there. Because it's leverage later. You're smart. Use your smarts. Go out and get a stud quarterback late. I'm talking late. Go get Sam Darnold. Go get Lamar Jackson. Go get Jimmy Garoppolo. And sit on him. You don't got to play him. You got freaking Mahomes. Right? That's the point. Start the run. Okay? So, I hope I've given you guys a good bedrock when you go into your drafts. I think it's important to keep these in mind, and I'll give it real quickly to you. Have a plan, but be flexible. Understand where you're going to draft what positions, right? That's one. Two, have a sleeper list, but don't go crazy. If your guy gets taken, just go down to the next guy. Risk reward, right? Have the most surefire guy first. The next best guy second. If the guy gets picked, go to the next, okay? Point three, make a draft outline. If you know you need to handcuff a player, or if there's a sleeper you really like, have an outline. Have it put there beside the draft. When you're writing down your draft list, have it right beside there. So then you know, right? Point four, be a trendsetter. Be a trendsetter. Don't be afraid to get the best guy first. If people are holding off, grab them. Okay? What do you think, guys? You loving this? I'm loving this stuff. It's so much fun. I'll tell you, I really do believe it's interesting to me. There are things in life that are a release. And Lenny said that. Lenny and I were talking the other day, and I love that he told me this, and it's so true. He said, I went to the doctor the other day. I don't know. You know how he is. I love Lenny. He says, I went to the doctor the other day, and he said, you can never quit podcasting because it keeps your mind nimble. And I think that's important because, I think just by listening to me, you guys all know that I have a pretty active mind, that I'm probably moving pretty quickly with what I'm thinking about, right? But this right here, Lenny is a legend. I mean, God, Cubby, I'm so glad you're here tonight, man. Thank you so much for coming. I really am blessed to have a good friend and supporter like you here. But back on point. So for me, it's funny. I grew up. My dad was a coach. My dad was a high school football coach, and he was a high school baseball coach. So from a very young age, I went to practices. I went to games. I kept score in the dugout, right? And it just became this part of my life. I played for him in high school, okay? So I go to college. I'm this screw up, right? I'm out having fun, chasing girls and, normal college stuff, right? But I always played softball. I always ran my own softball team, right? And what I loved about that is I got to order the shirts, and I got to get to make the lineup. We had really good teams. You can imagine, right? You could imagine being a coach's son. I always had a lot of talent to pick from, right? So we always had a blast doing it. But then I got a little bit older. My shoulders started to deteriorate. The knees started to rub on each other. So I was really missing this. And I know I'm getting sidetracked, but I'll get back quickly. I was really missing something. And it's funny, I met Lenny Melnick on Facebook about a year and a half ago. And it's just been this growing momentum, right? And here I am tonight, blessed to bring you my take on fantasy football and strategy, and sharing with you guys what I obsess about, right? So thank you guys for joining in. I hope you're enjoying this. I won't waste any more of your time, but I do think, for me anyway, it helps relax me when I'm able to share things about me, my own personal life, my upbringing, right? I think my dad is such, I swear he's listening to me right now. I know he is. And he's just loving this. So, thanks for sharing this with me, guys, is my point. Cheers. 4 roses tonight, guys. Japanese whiskey. Kyle, you with me? It says Kentucky on the bottle, but I have been informed by a number of people that it is Japanese owned. Hearsay. Regardless. Let's get back on point. So again, I mentioned it earlier. Living here in Indianapolis, I drive past Lucas Oil Stadium, no shit, on the way to and from work every day. Those of you that know me know I'm a Steelers fan. That doesn't mean that I don't have an affinity for Andrew Luck. Just a real quick note. We all know Andrew Luck's dad, Oliver, played professional football. What you might not know is he was Warren Moon's backup. He was actually a really good player at my alma mater, West Virginia University. He played there when I was a very young child, but I do remember him playing. And the thing about... So, Oliver Luck was the athletic director at West Virginia University. He was really instrumental in adding to the stadium. He was really instrumental in doing a lot of improvements, making us a big-time program. He brought us to the Big 12. So, again, you can imagine there is a connection there with me and Andrew Luck. That said, the fans that booed him, I think it's absolute. They aren't fans. Any fan that boos is not a fan. Okay? I understand you're frustrated. Take that shit elsewhere. Okay? I say this because I hear it a lot at Morgantown when I go home. And it's really easy. It's really easy to get lazy and boo, right? But be an insightful fan. Think about what that man is going through. Think about, this is a game that he loves. His dad played. He watched from a little kid. I can speak from experience. This guy wants to play, okay? He's not able to. Let the man alone, all right? But here's why I bring it up. Because I hate doing this. This is cheap entertainment. Everybody wants to hear this shit. It's lazy. But I do want to talk about the important thing here. Let's talk about the Colts. Everybody's writing the Colts off. Kyle, you and I had this discussion this morning. Everybody's writing the Colts off. I'm not doing that. Okay? Sure. The fantasy numbers probably aren't going to be what they were with Andrew Luck. But that doesn't mean that Jacoby Brissett is going to be a bad player. Jacoby Brissett was playing as a first-time starter in 2017 with an inferior group around him. Okay? He had a lot of inexperienced players around him. Here's my point. And here's the underlying factor behind all of this. This is why I believe that the Colts aren't destined for failure. Now, I think it's going to be tough for them to make the playoffs. But I think they're going to compete all year. And I think you're going to see the best version of the Indianapolis Colts this year. Okay? First and foremost, T.Y. Hilton comes out and is dedicated this season to Andrew Luck. Calls him his best friend. Says he loves him. You think that guy's going to fail? You think that guy's got something to play for? Shit. Point 2. These players are motivation driven. Okay? You think about these guys. All of these guys have pretty close to the same amount of talent. You think they're sick of hearing how they're just Andrew Luck and the other 21 knuckleheads, that there's no talent around him? Bullshit. They want to prove a point that they're a good team without Andrew Luck. And you think Jacoby Brissett wants to eat crow? This guy's motivated, guys. There's a lot of motivation behind this team. And guess what? They're talented. Why are they talented? In 2017, Ryan Grigson was an incompetent owner, CEO, whatever you want to call him, GM, right? Ryan Grigson was not a capable decision maker. Chuck Pagano, and this is going to sound harsh, got re-signed to a job that he didn't deserve because he had cancer. He was unequipped to be the head coach of that team. And it showed. So you got an awful formula there, right? You got a bad GM and you got a bad coach. Of course you're going to stink. Reich is a good coach. Ballard is a good GM. Look at the players they've brought in. Indianapolis is going to surprise some guys. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, guys. I'm not saying that. But I'm telling you, don't be surprised if they win 9 or 10 games. I'll give one more theory and then I want to get on to some real shit. Here's my theory on Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck retired because he couldn't stomach going through another aggressive, long-term injury recovery. He had an speculation, but I know what I'm hearing. A bone in the lower half of his leg. It's got to be the Achilles tendon. He has an Achilles tendon injury, and that is a long and grueling rehabilitation. He didn't want to come out and say it. He just rather bowed out with grace. I give the man respect for what he did. I hold no ill will towards him. He's a smart man. He has a Stanford degree. He'll be just fine, guys. And guess what? So will the Colts. Okay? I went back and forth about whether or not I wanted to talk about this. Because, again, I think this is kind of cheap. But it sure shit is interesting, right? That's my take on it. So let's talk about something even more interesting to me. And then we're going to get into some receivers. My list, if you will. Okay? But I think it's important, before we talk about lists, before we talk about projections, before you can understand the future, you have to really get a grasp on what's happened in the past, right? Let's talk about last season. You're absolutely right, Cub. He is going to be just fine. The dude's smart. He's got... they gave him $17 million. I wish to hell someone would do that to me. Here you go. You're leaving, but here's an extra $17 million. What kind of world we living in? Anyway, let's talk about what's real. Statistics. Okay? Let's talk about last year's statistics in regards... Hey, Andy, good to see you. In regards to the wide receiver class. Because I think it's important when you look at the facts, just the facts, man, just the facts. It tells you maybe there's not as much depth as you think. Right? And we all sit here, we stress about running back. We all stress about having enough running back depth. And it's important. I'm not saying it's not. But listen to this. Guys, we got a great chat room here. How many wide receivers, without looking, had 100 receptions last year? I think it's important to take note when you're doing this. Because you have all these great, warm and fuzzies, right? But really, the only thing that matters is 2018 stats, in my mind, because it happened. It's true, right? So, just because I don't want a whole bunch of dead air, I got a bunch of shit to talk about. 100 receptions last year in the NFL, there were 11 receivers that did it. There were 11 guys who had 100 receptions last year. That's it. 11. Thank you, Kyle. I know I'm on a delay, so. I mean, think about that. So you think about 100 receptions is so 16 games. I didn't do this math. I probably should have. 16 games divided by 100 receptions is about what? 6 receptions a game, 7 receptions a game. Do the math, guys. Help me out. It's not that much, right? So to say that only 11 players did it, I think says a whole lot. Michael Thomas, 125 receptions. Here, I'll even go a bit further. Zach Ertz was in there. Travis Kelce was in there. And Christian McCaffrey was in there. So there was only 8 receivers. 8 receivers that had 100 receptions last year. Does that put a different scope on things, guys? I think it does. So let's talk about the receivers, because that's what we're here for. Michael Thomas had 125 catches last year. That's 10 more than the next highest. D-Hop had 115. Okay? Julio had 113. Thielen 113. Juju 111. Devontae 111. AB 104. And Diggs had 102. That's it. That's why I'm saying this is important to look at this. Because like you said, 25. Shit. I would have thought that too. I'm not sitting here saying otherwise. 8 receivers had 100 receptions. This one's a little higher, but I think it's still important. How about 1,000 yards? How many receivers do you think had 1,000 yards? Excuse me. How many players do you think had 1,000 yards last year? Pause for dramatic effect. Let's talk about yards per reception while I get a couple answers on that. Yards per reception, I think, is really interesting. And when you look at it, Mike Evans, 17.7 yards per reception. Tyreek Hill, 17.0 yards per reception. Speaks to big plays, right? Speaks to flash. T.Y. Hilton, 16.7. George, yes, Zach Ertz had the second most receptions of anyone last year. He had 116 receptions. It's more than 17, Kyle. It's more than 17. So, on the other end of the spectrum, you have, among the list of 1,000-yard players, you have Stephon Diggs at 10.0. George, your boy, Zach Ertz, 10.0. That speaks to being more of a possession type guy, right? More of a chain mover. So, yards per reception really can kind of tell you what you're looking at in a guy's part of the offense. A guy's role in the offense, excuse me. So, there were 21 players in the NFL last year who had 1,000 yards receiving. I'm not going to go through them because that's boring, right? But it's important to take note. Julio Jones had 1,677 yards receiving last year. That's a phenomenal year, guys. He had 100 more yards receiving than DeAndre Hopkins. It's impressive to think about. But it's also important to understand with Julio, there's 2 underlying factors with him, right? One, the return of Dirk Cutter, which I think will be a positive factor. I think that will help him. They're familiar. He understands what Julio can do. But the one that's working against him is the emergence of Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley turned quickly into the red zone target last year, and Julio Jones' numbers hurt because of it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Surprisingly low on this list in yards per reception for me, Antonio Brown only averaged 12.5 yards per reception. I would have expected more from him. And as well, Keenan Allen, 12.3. So, again, it's important to do this, but it's also fun to do this, right? Just sitting there and looking into the little nuggets. Let's talk about touchdowns. My last question for you guys. How many players had double-digit touchdowns receiving last year? While I'm waiting on a couple answers there, let's talk about catch rate. Catch rate's really important. I'll repeat it because I'm going to talk for a little bit. Double-digit touchdowns receiving last year. How many players? Catch rate. So, came across this catch rate chart. Really cool shit in here. I think it's important because when you're talking about catch rate, it's maximizing opportunities, right? Have I done any drafts yet? I did my first one this past week. Again, I have 3 coming this week, Andrea. So that's why I chose to do football tonight. I want to keep baseball on Tuesday, but tonight I have such an expansive show that I wanted to really roll it all up into 2 parts. So I planned on talking more about the list next week, but I think these stats are important to understand, right? So let's talk about catch rate. How about the leader in catch rate? Sorry, I'm blind. I got to explode this a little bit further. The leader in catch rate, of course, is Michael Thomas. He got 85% of his balls last year. I think that was fairly well documented. But I'm not going to talk about this whole list. But there are some players on here that I think we all need to take note of. And I'm starting here with number 2. The number 2 catch rate percentage-wise in the NFL last year was Tyler Lockett. He caught 81% of the balls thrown to him. He had 70 receptions for 965 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think there's value there, okay? Let's talk about Cole Beasley. He's 4th on this list. And that's going to end quickly because it's not numbered. So right now I'm at the top, I can tell you. He's 4th on this list. He had a 75% catch rate. 87 receptions for Cole Beasley. Now he's changed. He's changed scenery. He's now in Buffalo. It's important to take note of that. But I don't think it affects his production because he's just the type of player that Buffalo needs. He's the underneath chain mover, right? 87 receptions for 672 yards and 3 touchdowns. I look for those 3 touchdowns to go up in Buffalo. How about Rashard Higgins? 6th on this list, surprisingly. 74% catch rate. 53 for 572 and 4 touchdowns. Guys, he did that as a rookie. Okay? Going down through here, Sammy Watkins was surprising. 73% catch rate. Up there on the list. How about Alshon Jeffrey at 71%? Here's the guy I want to talk about. Calvin Ridley had a 70% catch rate. 92 receptions and 821 yards as a rookie. He had 10 touchdowns. Guys, it's important to understand Cal Ridley's a value. He's a value, okay? So, again, it helps. It helps when you have this information when you're going into a draft. Even just reading it and understanding it goes a long way when you're valuing these players. Because when you get down to that point, and you say Cole Beasley, say you're in the 12th round, and you've got your outline like I told you guys. You got Cole Beasley written there in the 12th round. You're thinking, oh shit, he caught 71% of the balls last year thrown to him. Maybe I should get this guy. He caught 87 balls last year. Right? It's important to know this. Any guesses? Can you give me some guesses? Double-digit touchdowns receiving. Because I want to talk about it before I move on. I do want to talk about my list real quick. 2 tight ends, 9 wide receivers. 11 players had double-digit... Oh, shit, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. I'm wrong. It's even less. Double-digit receptions for touchdowns. 9 players. That's it. 9 players had double-digit touchdowns receiving last year. Antonio Brown had 15. Devontae Adams had 13. Ebron had 13, tight end. Tyreek Hill had 12. D-Hop had 11. Kelsey had 10, tight end. Calvin Ridley, as a rookie, had 10 receiving touchdowns, guys. Hint, effing hint. Tyler Lockett had 10 and Mike Williams had 10. Okay? It's important to know that. Production is important, especially in the red zone. Emphasize those guys. So let's talk about my list, because I've only got 10 minutes. But I want to get into this because I want to get through it all next week. It's important for you guys to understand, on Thursday. Come back on Thursday to listen to the end of this. I want to tell you about these receivers. There's great value here. But you got to know where to get it. Okay? So I'm going to do it a touch differently this week. I'm going to give you the industry standard. Again, fantasy football diehards. This is their draft. This is their top 12. Hopkins 1, 6th pick of the first round. Adams 2, 8th pick. Michael Thomas 3, 12th pick. Odell Beckham 4, 12th pick. Up 1. Tyreek Hill 5, 2-2. Smith-Schuster 6, 2-3. Evans 7, 2-11. Brown 8, 2-12. Diggs 9, 3-5. Thielen 10, 3-6. And Keenan Allen 3-9. Okay? I only got 11 because T.Y. Hilton fell out. T.Y. Hilton was the 12th. So let's talk about that. I agree. I agree with Hopkins 1. Okay? I agree with Adams 2. I agree with Thomas 3. Instead of Julio Jones, I love Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is my number 4 wide receiver. He's currently going in a second round, second pick draft value. He's gained 1 spot in average ADP. Again, with Kansas City's offense, I think it's important to understand. It's likely to go up from 87 receptions, from 1,427 yards. That's right. That's a lot of yards. 12 touchdowns. Okay? The offense last year was 3rd in passing. Yeah, he's not going to be suspended. He's free and clear. They've added more weapons. Tyreek Hill is uncoverable. They have the 18th best offensive line. But guess what? It doesn't bother me because they have a similar group to what they had last year. Tyreek Hill is my number 4. I have Julio Jones number 5. Juju Smith-Schuster number 6. Odell Beckham number 7. Odell is interesting. There is some risk with Odell Beckham. I love his situation in Cleveland. But the guy, just like Antonio Brown, serves a bit of risk. I love Antonio Brown this year. Okay? Mike Evans is next. Antonio Brown, I have as my number 9 wide receiver. At the second round, at the end of the second round, I think he provides significant value. Okay? And I say that because, one, John Gruden is going to force feed the ball to Antonio Brown. Two, they don't have anything else. Cub Hub, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Three, he's living his... That may as well be called the Oakland Browns because that is his team. They designed a freaking helmet for him. He's getting paid for that helmet. If he's not happy there, he won't be happy else anywhere. I love Antonio Brown this year, guys. And I didn't at the beginning. All this crap came out about his frostbite and all that stuff. I'm out. But not now. I'm in. I'm in on Brown. He's my number 9 receiver. Stephon Diggs, number 10. 3rd round, 5th pick. He's the new focal point of this receiving core under the direction of Kevin Stefanski. He's the guy you want, not Thielen. Okay? Understand that. Understand that they've changed coordinators. They've changed philosophies. That affects these guys. I know Thielen came out last year and was hot. Don't buy into the hype with him, though. Go after Diggs instead. Okay? Keenan Allen, 11. Amari Cooper is my last wide receiver 1 at a 310. I'm warming up to Amari Cooper, guys. Because I think Tony Pollard's a good ball player. No, that's wrong. With all due respect, George. That's wrong. It's antiquated thinking. That's why I'm here. The change in the offensive coordinator. They focused more on getting Diggs the ball. He's the wide receiver 1 and the thought process of that offense. That's my whole point. He had a great beginning of the year last year. It was with a different guy. Diggs is the guy. I'm sorry if you've already drafted George. I'm sorry to break this to you. I apologize. So, again, Cooper. Let's talk about him. A competent running game opens things up for Amari Cooper. Right? I really do think, even if Zeke doesn't sign, I believe Zeke will sign. I believe Zeke will sign within this next week. Okay? But this Pollard guy is a competent running back. So, I'm starting to gain confidence back in Amari Cooper. Yeah, I mean, opinions are like buttholes, right? Don't kick your cat, man. So, there's your first wide receiver 1s. Again, realistic world, you want to get 2 of these guys. There are enough running backs that are going to fall. If you see a guy like Cooper sitting out there in the 3rd or 4th round, if he falls to the 4th round, snatch his ass. Get him. Because it's value, okay? I got 6 minutes. I think I can get through this second tier. And then next week, on Thursday, rubber's going to hit the road because there's 86 wide receivers that we need to talk about. And there's a lot of value. These guys are easy, right? I always love these shows that talk about, oh, should I take Antonio Brown or should I take, Odell Beckham? Who gives a? That's not winning your league. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tier receivers are the guys that are winning your league. Understand value. Understand why these guys are where they are. Okay? So, wide receiver 2s. Let's talk again about the industry. The industry currently has T.Y. Hilton as a 310, number 1. Cooper is a 310 as well, Number 2, sidebar, these are averages, so they can be the same number, right? Just for clarity. Number 3, Brandon Cooks at a 4.3. Number 4 is Robert Woods at a 4.9. 5, Edelman, 4.11. 6, my boy Tyler Lockett at 5.2. 7, ironically, Chris Godwin, 5.3. 8, Kenny Golladay, 5.5. A lot of talent here, right? Calvin Ridley, 9, 5.5. Tyler Boyd, 10. Cooper Kupp and Mike Williams. Again, go back to that list. Value. These are values. Here's where you're going to win your draft. These second 12. Names we talked about with double-digit wide receiving touchdowns. Mike Williams, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett. It's important to identify value here, right? Let's talk about my list. I have Adam Thielen as my first wide receiver too, George. Okay? So he didn't jump that far. Don't jump off a cliff. Don't kick your cat. He actually has raised one in ADP. So he's a 3.6, he was a 3.7. So, George, deep breath. Have a little drink. Robert Woods, number 2. Robert Woods was the 4th in the industry list. I moved him up to 2nd. Do you look at that offense? The injury risk with Todd Gurley? Robert Woods could have a really prevalent role in that offense. Number 3, Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is actually ranked ahead of Robert Woods. I don't see it that way. Okay? Number 4, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin. 5th round, 3rd pick. Guys, if you haven't seen this guy, he's a really special athlete. He's someone to target. Okay? I've bumped him up, it looks like 3 spots from the industry. Again, he's 5'3". Tyler Lockett. I can't stress to you guys enough. Yeah, and that's the thing, George. That's what makes it great, right? It's all perception. It's not even opinion, it's perception. I like the speed aspect. I like the fact that he's a slot type guy. So yeah, I agree. I love, guys, Tyler Lockett. If I get a chance to get Tyler Lockett in the 4th or 5th round, given what I just shared with you guys, he's a steal. He's a steal. I got to revisit it. I know I'm running short on time. Catch rate. He had the 2nd best catch rate of all, not receivers, players, guys, of all players. I got to expand this because I'm blind. The 2nd, but Michael Thomas had the 1st. He caught 81% of the balls thrown to him last year, guys. 81. He had 10 touchdowns. That is elite numbers. He's someone you got to target. And if you got to go to the 4th round for him, well, you got to go to the 4th round for him. Okay? That's my point. That's why you make these lists. That's why you have a plan. Tyler Lockett, 5th round, 2nd pick. That's where he's currently going. Calvin Ridley. I'm slowing down here because this is where you win your draft. These guys. Any knucklehead can pick the first 12. Understanding why you pick these guys is important. Okay? Calvin Ridley. Currently a 5th round, 5th pick. 10 touchdowns last year, guys. 10 touchdowns. I love it too. I love Ridley. Last year, 64 receptions, 821 yards, and 10 touchdowns. He's in the 4th best passing offense, averaging 290 yards last year. Bonus, 1. They spent 2 first-round picks on offensive linemen last year. What do you think that means for Matt Ryan? What do you think that means for the receivers? It means more time, right? Point 2, Dirk Cutter comes back. Steve Sarkisian was one of those guys, feast or famine, right? Dirk Cutter has an established relationship with Matt Ryan. Yes, Calvin Ridley wasn't there. But you got to think this guy knows how to open up the game, okay? Calvin Ridley is a solid wide receiver too. He is a target. Kenny Golladay, 5'5". Julian Edelman, I've bumped down my list. He's a 4th round pick, 11th pick overall. So that means I've put him behind Godwin, Lockett, and Ridley. Not that I don't like Edelman. He's certainly a proven commodity. It's that I value those guys in front of him more. Okay? If I get a chance to get Edelman, I'll take him. But I'm just going to take the importance of making your own list, right? After Edelman, I think Jarvis Landry is criminally undervalued. 6th round, 6th pick for Jarvis Landry in that offense. Solid value here, right? How about Cooper Kupp, the 3rd of the Los Angeles receivers, recovering from a knee surgery, but you got to think he's going to get stronger as the year goes on. 5th round, 11th pick. Tyler Boyd. 2 more guys, and then I'm getting off here. Tyler Boyd, 5th round, 8th pick. He's gained 3 points in ADP. I was out on all things Cincinnati until quite recently. I started researching Zach Taylor. And I started researching some of the things that he did with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. I really do believe in Tyler Boyd. Last year, under Marv Lewis's leadership, I say that tongue-in-cheek. I understand. Whatever. 76 receptions. 1,028 yards and 7 TDs. That's last year. With Andy Dalton thrown to him. With an awful offense. No Tyler Eifert. No AJ Green. All I'm saying, give the guy a chance. The last guy on the list is another guy, exceptional value, 6th round, 1st pick, Mike Williams. Guys, if you guys... So I'm a college football guy, right? I remember Mike Williams at Clemson. This guy is a man-child. He is just... he's more talented than you are. He's more talented than a lot of people. Again, with Mike Williams, 10 touchdowns last year. So he's one of 9 players that had 10 touchdowns last year. This is an exceptional value in the 6th round, guys. Albeit the beginning of the 6th round. 10 touchdowns last year. Money talks. And this is money. Okay? So there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. George, you're a warrior. Rock on, brother. Lenny, Cub Hub, Kyle, all the other people, Andrea, anyone else that came with me. Chaps Fantasy Chat, Tuesday nights. Normally baseball, but it's draft week, right? So, I don't know about Arnie and I at 9. He's having some internet issues, but if he is willing, I am able. We'll go. Kevin, thank you, sir, very much. I will continue this conversation. I will give you the 3rd tier on. There is tremendous value in this next couple tiers that we really need to discuss. We'll talk about that day after tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please come back. It's important. Okay? Love all you guys. Chaps Fantasy Chat. Lenny Melnick Fantasy Sports Network. Good night.